The champagne glass slipped from my mother's hand when she saw the signature at the bottom of the contract, not when I'd introduced Marcus as my boyfriend. Not when he'd complimented her roast, not even when she'd spent 20 minutes explaining how I was the family disappointment. But when Marcus quietly pulled out his phone, opened my Twitch profile, and showed her the partnership agreement with its 7-figure revenue projection for the year. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The crystal shattered against the hardwood floor of our family dining room, sending fragments across the Persian rug that had witnessed 1,000 small humiliations before this one. My sister Claire froze mid-sentence, her fork suspended over the apple pie she'd been cutting to impress her date. Dad's newspaper crumpled in his hands. Even the grandfather clock seemed to pause between ticks, as if time itself needed a moment to process what had just shifted in the delicate ecosystem of our family dinner. 20 minutes earlier, Marcus had walked into our house like he belonged there, all easy confidence and genuine interest in whatever small talk my parents threw at him. He was the kind of man who remembered details, who asked follow-up questions about my father's golf game and my mother's garden club. Claire had been practically glowing, introducing him as her boyfriend from the law firm, the one with the Harvard MBA in the corner office view. I'd been relegated to my usual position at family gatherings, invisible at the end of the table, picking at my food while they celebrated everything I wasn't. The conversation had flowed around me like I was a stone in their stream, my parents hanging on Marcus's every word about his work in corporate litigation, his weekend sailing, his thoughts on the housing market. Claire kept touching his arm, marking her territory, shooting me those sideways glances that said what they'd always said since we were kids. See what I can get? See what you'll never have? That's when Mom had started. The way she always did, with that laugh that wasn't quite cruel but wasn't kind either. Oh, Marcus, you should know what you're getting into with this family. Claire here is our success story. Graduated summa cum laude. Landed that position at the marketing firm right out of college. But Emma, she gestured toward me with her wine glass. Emma has decided that playing video games in her room is a career path. The familiar heat had crept up my neck. Not anger, exactly. More like the dull ache of a wound that never quite heals because someone keeps pressing on it. I'd heard variations of this speech at every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering for the past 3 years. Ever since I'd dropped out of business school to stream full-time. Ever since I'd moved into that tiny studio apartment downtown with the good internet connection and the soundproofed walls. Gaming, Dad had added, folding his newspaper with the precision he used for everything, is what kids do before they grow up and get real jobs. Marcus had nodded politely, the way you do when you're meeting your girlfriend's family and don't want to cause waves. But I'd caught something in his expression, a flicker of recognition that my parents had missed entirely. He'd asked, casual as anything, "What kind of gaming?" "Oh, all kinds," Mom had continued, warming to her favorite topic, my failure to launch. She sits in that apartment all day, talking to a camera, playing those shooting games. Calls herself a content creator. She'd made air quotes around the words, as if they were a foreign concept that couldn't possibly mean anything real. Streaming. I'd said quietly, "I stream on Twitch." "Stream what?" Claire had asked, like I'd said I performed interpretive dance for squirrels. That's when Marcus had set down his fork and really looked at me for the first time that evening. "What's your handle?" The question had caught me off guard. In 3 years of family dinners, no one had ever asked for specifics about my work. They'd dismissed it wholesale, but they'd never wanted details. Nightshade gaming, I'd said, barely above a whisper. Marcus had gone very still. Then he'd reached for his phone. The next 60 seconds had unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Marcus scrolling through my channel, his eyebrows climbing higher with each swipe. My parents exchanging those looks, the ones that said, "Here comes another lecture about real careers and responsible choices." Claire smirking, probably planning to use this moment as ammunition for weeks to come. And then Marcus had turned the phone around. The Twitch partnership dashboard filled the screen, displaying subscriber counts, donation totals, and sponsorship deals in neat, professional columns. But it was the revenue projection that had done it, the number at the bottom that showed what I'd earned in the past 12 months, what the platform projected for the coming year. Numbers that dwarfed my father's salary as a high school principal. Numbers that made Claire's entry-level marketing position look like an allowance. That's when Mom had dropped the champagne glass. But this story doesn't really begin with broken crystal on a dining room floor. It begins earlier, in a different kind of silence. The kind that happens when you're 12 years old, and your parents realize you're not going to be the daughter they ordered from the catalog of their dreams. I was supposed to be like Claire, you see. Blonde, where I was brunette. Outgoing, where I was introspective. Naturally gifted at the social mathematics that governed our suburban ecosystem. Claire had been student body president, homecoming queen, the daughter who brought home report cards that went straight to the refrigerator door. I brought home B-minuses and spent my afternoons in the computer lab, learning to code because it was quieter than the cafeteria and no one expected me to perform there. Our house was a shrine to Claire's achievements. Trophies lined the mantel. Certificates covered the hallway walls. Photo albums bulged with pictures of her accepting awards, cutting ribbons, posing with local politicians. My academic achievements, when they happened, got filed away in a folder Mom kept in the kitchen drawer, like receipts for things she might need to return someday. The divide had started small. Claire got piano lessons. I got told to practice quieter because the neighbors were complaining. Claire got summer camps and tennis lessons. I got library cards and told to find something constructive to do with my time. By middle school, the pattern was set. Claire was the investment. I was the expense. High school had been worse. While Claire dated the quarterback and planned prom themes, I discovered online gaming. Not the cute, casual games my parents might have tolerated, but serious competitive gaming. First-person shooters, where reaction time mattered more than social status. Strategy games where being quiet and observant were advantages, not handicaps. I was good at it. Really good. By sophomore year, I was ranking in the top percentiles of every game I touched. I had teams trying to recruit me, online friends who valued my input, a community where skill mattered more than whether you remembered to smile enough or spoke up in the right tone of voice. My parents saw it as escapism, an unhealthy obsession that would pass once I matured and discovered real interests. They set time limits, threatened to take away my computer, staged interventions where they sat me down and explained how I was wasting my potential. They never asked if I was happy. They never asked if I was learning anything. They certainly never asked if I was any good at it. College was supposed to fix me. Business school was supposed to give me practical skills, social opportunities, a chance to reinvent myself as the successful daughter they'd always wanted. For 2 years, I tried. I joined study groups, attended networking events, dated boys who looked good on paper, and made conversation that felt like job interviews. But every night, I came back to my dorm room.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
And fired up my computer. I streamed for tiny audiences. 5 or 10 people who appreciated my gameplay commentary and tactical breakdowns. Those viewers became regulars, then friends, then a community. While my classmates were at fraternity parties, I was building something that felt real in a way that business finance never did. The decision to leave school hadn't been dramatic. No storming out, no great declaration of independence. I'd simply looked at my course schedule for junior year, looked at my Twitch analytics showing steady growth month after month, and realized I was trying to live someone else's life. The conversation with my parents had been brutal. Mom had cried. Dad had shouted. Claire had swooped in like a vulture, offering to help me see reason, to understand that I was throwing away every opportunity they'd sacrificed to give me. They'd presented alternatives: community college, trade school, entry-level positions at companies where Dad had connections. I'd moved out the next week. The studio apartment I'd found was nothing special. 400 square feet above a coffee shop, thin walls and thinner bank account. But it had fiber internet and space for a proper gaming setup, and for the first time in my life I woke up excited about the day ahead. The early months had been lean. Ramen noodles and generic cereal, waiting tables at night to cover rent while I built my channel during the day. My subscriber count crept upwards slowly, 10 by 10, 100 by 100. I learned about SEO and social media marketing, about building brand partnerships, and engaging with communities across multiple platforms. My parents had predicted failure, and for a while, it looked like they might be right. There were weeks when my viewership dropped, when sponsorship deals fell through, when I wondered if I was deluding myself about having any real talent. But I kept grinding, kept improving, kept showing up even when the audience was small and the revenue was smaller. The breakthrough had come during a tournament stream. I'd been playing in a competitive Valorant league, nothing major, just a regional competition with a modest prize pool. But something had clicked that night. My aim was perfect, my strategies were working, and my commentary was drawing viewers who'd never heard of me before. The clip of my final winning kill had gone viral. Not internet famous viral, but gaming community viral. Suddenly I had sponsors reaching out. Other streamers wanting to collaborate. Viewers who showed up consistently and brought friends. My subscriber count jumped from 1,500 to 15,000 in 2 weeks. That's when the real work had started. Building a sustainable content calendar, negotiating partnership deals, learning the business side of being a creator. I discovered I was good at more than just gaming. I was good at entertaining, at building community, at creating content that kept people coming back. My parents had noticed the change in my financial situation, of course. I'd stopped asking for help with rent, started picking up dinner checks when we met, bought a car that wasn't held together by duct tape and optimism. But they'd assumed I'd gotten a real job, something I was too embarrassed to tell them about. When I'd tried to explain that streaming was working, that I was actually making a living doing what I loved, they'd nodded politely and changed the subject. Claire had been worse. She'd taken my success as a personal insult, a suggestion that her conventional path might not be the only valid one. Every family gathering became an opportunity for her to showcase her achievements while dismissing mine. She'd bring home awards from work, photos from company retreats, stories about important clients and meaningful projects. When anyone asked about my work, she'd jump in with explanations about how I was still figuring things out, still in my experimental phase. The irony was that my experimental phase was out-earning her established career by a factor of 3. But numbers on a screen didn't translate to respect around the dinner table. My parents understood Claire's success, because it looked like success they recognized. Awards, titles, office buildings, business cards. My success was invisible to them, happening in a world they didn't understand with an audience they'd never meet. By my 3rd year of streaming, I'd built something substantial. My channel had over 100,000 subscribers, my videos regularly hit 6-figure view counts, and my revenue came from multiple streams including sponsorships, donations, merchandise, and platform partnerships. I'd hired an editor, a social media manager, even a part-time accountant to handle the business side. But at family dinners, I was still Emma who played video games for a living. The night I'd met Marcus had been different. Claire had been so excited about this new boyfriend, this successful lawyer who was everything our parents valued. Educated, ambitious, financially stable, socially connected. She'd been building him up for weeks, describing his accomplishments, his prospects, his potential as marriage material. I'd expected another evening of being the cautionary tale, the example of what happened when you didn't apply yourself properly. I'd planned to smile, nod, ask polite questions, and leave early to prep for the next day's stream. I hadn't expected Marcus to recognize my handle. I certainly hadn't expected him to pull up my partnership dashboard and show it to my parents like evidence in a court case. Now, standing in the dining room with champagne soaking into the Persian rug and my parents staring at my phone like it was broadcasting from Mars, everything felt different. The air tasted different. Even the light seemed changed, like someone had adjusted the dimmer switch on reality itself. "Is this real?" Dad asked, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Marcus nodded. "She's one of the top streamers on the platform. Her audience engagement rates are incredible, and her sponsorship deals." He trailed off, probably realizing that he was about to list numbers that would make everyone at the table uncomfortable. Mom sat down heavily, still staring at the screen. "You make this much money playing games?" "Creating content," I corrected gently. Gaming is part of it, but there's strategy involved, community building, brand partnerships, entertainment value. It's more like running a small media company. Claire had gone very quiet, her face cycling through expressions I'd never seen before. Confusion, recognition, something that might have been respect if I was reading it right. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Why hadn't I told them? Because they'd never asked. Because they'd made it clear they weren't interested in understanding what I did. Because I'd learned early that success they couldn't recognize didn't count as success at all. "I tried to," I said finally. "Remember when I explained about the sponsorship deals, when I showed you the articles about the tournament I won? You said it was nice that I had hobbies." The silence that followed was different from the usual family dinner silences. This one had weight to it, substance. It was the silence of people realizing they'd been having the wrong conversation for years. Marcus handed my phone back to me, his movements careful like he was defusing a bomb. "Your content is really impressive," he said. "The production value, the audience interaction. You've built something significant." Claire finally found her voice. "You're actually successful." It wasn't a question, and it wasn't quite an accusation. It was the sound of someone's worldview shifting, of assumptions crumbling and reforming in real time. "I've been trying to tell you that," I said. Dad stood up and started picking up pieces of broken champagne glass, his movements mechanical. "I don't understand," he said, not looking at me. "You dropped out of college to play video games." "To build a business," I corrected. "College was teaching me skills I didn't need for work I didn't want to do. This taught me skills I use every day for work I love." "But it's not," Mom started, then stopped. "It's not what we pictured for you." And there it was. The heart of everything. Not that I'd failed, but that I'd succeeded in a way they couldn't picture. I'd built a life that didn't fit their template, achieved goals they didn't recognize, found happiness in a place they'd never thought to look. The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd ever had. Slowly, carefully, like people learning a new language, my parents started asking real questions about my work. How did sponsorships work? What was my audience like? How did I create content that kept people engaged? I found myself explaining things I'd never expected them to want to hear. The strategy behind building a personal brand. The complexity of content creation across multiple platforms. The skills involved in live entertainment, community management, business development. Marcus asked the best questions, his legal training helping him understand the business structures involved. Claire listened more than she talked, which was unprecedented. Even Dad put down his newspaper and leaned forward when I explained how I'd negotiated my first major sponsorship deal. "You did all this yourself?" Mom asked. "With help," I said. "I have a team now, an editor, a social media manager, a business advisor." But yeah, I built it from nothing. The evening stretched longer than any family dinner in recent memory. For the first time in years, I wasn't watching the clock, wasn't planning my escape. We talked about my work the way families are supposed to talk about careers, with genuine interest and pride. Claire walked me to my car when the evening finally ended. "I owe you an apology," she said, leaning against my door. "I thought you were just, I don't know, avoiding real life." "And now?" She smiled, and for a moment she looked like the sister I'd grown up with, before success and competition had built walls between us. "Now I think you were building real life while the rest of us were following instructions." The drive home gave me time to process what had happened. The validation felt good, obviously. After years of being dismissed, being seen felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. But something else was shifting too, something deeper than just family dynamics. I'd spent so long proving myself to an audience of strangers online that I'd forgotten how much I still wanted recognition from the people who'd known me first. Not approval exactly, but acknowledgement. The simple recognition that I was competent, that I'd built something worthwhile, that the path I'd chosen had been valid all along. Back in my apartment, I sat down at my streaming setup and started my evening broadcast. My regular viewers were already gathering in chat, asking about my day, sharing stories from their own lives. These people had been celebrating my successes for years, supporting me through failures, building the community that had made everything else possible. "Had dinner with my family tonight," I told them, adjusting my microphone. First time they really understood what we do here. The chat exploded with congratulations, heart emojis, people sharing their own stories about family members who'd come around to understanding their unconventional careers. This community had been my real family for years, the people who showed up consistently, who celebrated victories and offered support during setbacks. But now I had both. The family I'd chosen and the family I'd been born into, finally speaking the same language. 3 days later, Mom called. Not to ask about dinner plans or remind me about Claire's birthday, but to ask if I'd be streaming that weekend. She wanted to watch, she said, to see what I actually did. Will you explain what's happening? She asked. I don't understand the games, but I'd like to learn. I smiled, looking at my streaming schedule, at the sponsorship calls I had lined up, at the content calendar that mapped out the next month of my career. Yeah, Mom, I can do that. The circle was finally complete. The daughter who'd been invisible for years had found a way to be seen, not by changing who she was, but by refusing to hide it. Success hadn't been about proving my family wrong. It had been about building something so undeniable that they couldn't look away. And the best part? This was just the beginning. The next family dinner was different from the start. Claire brought Marcus again, but this time the conversation didn't revolve around impressing him. Mom asked about my latest sponsorship deal with a gaming peripheral company. Dad wanted to know about the tournament I was competing in next month. Claire asked if I could teach her to play one of the games I streamed, just so she could understand the appeal. Marcus, meanwhile, had been doing his research. I watched some of your streams, he admitted over dessert. I can see why you have such a following. You're really good at this. The validation felt different now, earned rather than extracted, given freely rather than fought for. My parents were finally seeing me as I'd always been, not as a failed version of who they'd wanted me to become. Later that week, I got a text from Dad that made me laugh out loud. Watched your stream last night. You're much funnier than I expected. Also, you destroyed those other players. Very impressive. It was the first time he'd ever complimented my gaming skills. The first time he'd acknowledged that what I did required talent, strategy, and years of dedicated practice to master. The transformation wasn't instant or complete. Old habits die hard, and my parents occasionally slipped back into their old patterns of dismissing what they didn't understand. But something fundamental had shifted. They were trying now, making an effort to bridge the gap between their world and mine. Claire started following my social media, commenting on posts, even sharing some of my content with her friends. I'm proud of my sister, she posted one day, along with a link to a highlight reel from one of my tournament wins. She built something amazing while I was still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. Mom started watching my streams regularly, asking questions in chat that made my regular viewers laugh and welcome her into the community. She became particularly interested in the business side of content creation, asking detailed questions about revenue streams and audience development that showed she was taking my career seriously. Dad took longer to come around, but when he did, it was complete. He started telling his colleagues about my work, showing them clips of my best gameplay, explaining with visible pride how I'd built a 6-figure business from my bedroom. His friends were impressed, and his pride was genuine in a way I'd never experienced before. The change in family dynamics rippled outward. Extended family members who'd dismissed my career started asking questions, wanting to understand how streaming worked, how someone could make a living playing video games. Cousins who'd rolled their eyes at family gatherings started following my content, discovering that what I did was far more complex and demanding than they'd assumed. But the most significant change was internal. I'd spent years carrying the weight of their disappointment, measuring my success against their disapproval, feeling like I had to prove myself worthy of basic respect. Now that burden was gone. I could enjoy my achievements without the bitter aftertaste of family rejection. I could talk about my work without feeling defensive or apologetic. The business continued to grow. New sponsorship deals, larger audiences, opportunities to collaborate with other creators and participate in major tournaments. But now these victories felt complete in a way they never had before. I had the support of both my chosen family in the streaming community and my biological family at home. 6 months later, when I signed my biggest contract yet, A multi-year partnership deal with a major gaming company that would set me up financially for years to come. The first people I called were my parents. "We're so proud of you," Mom said. And for the first time in my life, I believed her completely. The story could end there, with reconciliation and mutual respect, with a family finally united in understanding and support. But real life is messier than fairy tales, and the most important lessons aren't always about other people learning to see you differently. Sometimes they're about learning to see yourself clearly, independent of anyone else's approval or understanding. About building something meaningful not because it will impress other people, but because it expresses who you truly are. I'd started streaming to escape a world that didn't value what I had to offer. I'd found success in a community that appreciated my skills and personality. But the real victory wasn't the revenue numbers, or the subscriber counts, or even my family's eventual recognition. It was the moment I realized I didn't need any of that to know my own worth. The broken champagne glass had been swept up and forgotten, but the moment it represented lived on. Not as the moment my family finally understood my success, but as the moment I stopped needing them to understand it. And that, more than any contract or tournament victory, was the real achievement. The real vindication. The real beginning of everything that came after. The months following that dinner transformed our house in ways I never expected. Mom started leaving my stream notifications on, the gentle ping of my broadcasts going live mixing with the familiar sounds of her morning routine. Dad discovered my YouTube channel and began watching my tutorial videos, with the same focus he applied to weekend golf instruction. Claire's friends started asking her about her famous sister, a phrase that made her simultaneously proud and slightly bewildered. But the real changes happened in smaller moments. Mom mentioning to her book club that I was featured in a gaming magazine. Dad explaining to his coworkers how Twitch monetization worked, speaking with the authority of someone who had done his research. Claire sending me screenshots when she spotted my merchandise in the wild, worn by teenagers at the mall where she shopped. The transformation wasn't without its awkward phases. My parents approached my career like tourists in a foreign country, enthusiastic but clearly out of their element. Mom started using gaming terminology incorrectly, asking if I had leveled up when I meant I had gained subscribers. Dad referred to my viewers as my customers, which wasn't wrong but wasn't quite right either. The learning curve went both directions. I had to adjust to having family members who actually wanted to understand what I did, who asked follow-up questions and remembered details from previous conversations. It felt strange to discuss sponsorship negotiations over Sunday breakfast, to have Mom ask about viewer demographics while she folded laundry, to find Dad watching my streams on his tablet while he grilled dinner. Marcus became an unexpected bridge between worlds. His legal background helped him grasp the business complexities of content creation, and he translated those insights in ways my family could understand. He explained intellectual property concerns when I was negotiating music licensing deals. He reviewed contracts before I signed them, catching clauses that could have caused problems later. More importantly, he normalized my success in ways that made my family more comfortable accepting it. When he mentioned meeting other content creators at industry events, when he casually referenced the networking aspects of my career, when he spoke about my work using the same professional vocabulary he applied to his own legal practice, it gave my parents permission to take me seriously. The shift became most apparent during holiday gatherings. Extended family members who had spent years politely ignoring my career suddenly wanted detailed explanations of how streaming worked. Cousins asked if I could help them start their own channels. Aunts inquired about the educational aspects of gaming content. Uncles who had never owned gaming consoles found themselves fascinated by the technical equipment required for professional broadcasting. My success became a point of pride for the family in ways I had never imagined possible. When relatives asked what everyone was doing for work, my parents no longer glossed over my career or changed the subject quickly. Instead, they launched into detailed explanations of my recent achievements, describing my audience growth and partnership deals with the enthusiasm they had once reserved for Claire's academic accomplishments. The role reversal was striking. Claire, who had always been the family success story, found herself in the unfamiliar position of having to share that spotlight. She handled it with more grace than I expected, But I could see her adjusting to a dynamic where she was no longer the only daughter making her parents proud. The change was most noticeable in our individual relationships. Mom started calling more frequently, not to check on my well-being or offer unsolicited advice about finding a real job, but to hear about my latest projects. She became genuinely interested in the creative aspects of content creation, asking about thumbnail design and video editing choices with the same attention she had once paid to Claire's marketing campaigns. Dad's transformation was more gradual, but perhaps more profound. He began incorporating my achievements into his conversations with friends and colleagues, sharing clips of my gameplay with the same pride he had once shown for Claire's graduation photos. When his golf buddies expressed skepticism about professional gaming, he defended the skill and strategy required with surprising passion. The vindication felt complete when my parents attended their first live gaming event with me. A regional tournament was being held 3 hours away, and I had qualified for the semifinals in 2 different games. I mentioned it casually during a family dinner, not expecting much interest, but to my surprise, they asked if they could come watch. The tournament venue was unlike anything they had experienced before. Thousands of spectators, professional stage lighting, commentary broadcast to online audiences, prize pools that rivaled traditional sporting events. My parents navigated this environment with the determined curiosity of people committed to understanding something important to their daughter. Watching them watch me compete was surreal. Mom cheered during clutch plays she didn't fully understand, responding to crowd energy and my focused expressions. Dad took notes on strategy, trying to follow the tactical decisions that led to victories or defeats. When I won my semifinal match, they stood and applauded with genuine pride, not just going through the motions but celebrating something they recognized as a real achievement. The drive home was filled with conversation about what they had witnessed. They asked questions about my competitors, about the preparation required for tournament play, about the pressure of performing live in front of large audiences. For the first time, they seemed to fully grasp that what I did required skill, dedication, and professional expertise comparable to any traditional career. Their newfound understanding extended to the business aspects of my work. Dad started asking detailed questions about revenue diversification, curious about how I balanced different income streams. Mom became interested in my content planning process, comparing it to lesson planning in her teaching days. They offered insights from their own professional experiences, treating my career challenges as legitimate business problems worthy of serious discussion. The most surprising development was their integration into my streaming community. Mom became a regular in my chat, known to viewers as MS Actual Mom, sharing embarrassing childhood stories and cheering during difficult gaming segments. Her presence added a humanizing element that viewers loved, and her genuine pride in my accomplishments resonated with audience members dealing with their own family dynamics. Dad's involvement was more behind the scenes but equally meaningful. He helped me organize my home office, applying his engineering background to optimize my streaming setup for better acoustics and lighting. He researched new equipment before major purchases, reading reviews and comparing specifications with the thoroughness he applied to every project. Claire's adjustment took longer, but eventually she found her own way to support my career. Her marketing background proved valuable when I was developing merchandise lines and planning promotional campaigns. She helped design social media strategies that expanded my reach beyond the gaming community, attracting viewers interested in entrepreneurship and creative careers. The professional growth that followed family recognition was significant but not entirely causational. My content improved partly because I was more confident, no longer carrying the weight of feeling like a disappointment. My business decisions became sharper because I could discuss them with family members who offered different perspectives and expertise. But the correlation worked both ways. As my career continued to flourish, my family's pride grew correspondingly. When I signed my first 6-figure sponsorship deal, they celebrated as enthusiastically as they would have celebrated Claire's promotion or a traditional milestone. When gaming magazines featured profiles about my success, they bought multiple copies and shared them with friends. The most meaningful moment came during my birthday dinner the following year. Instead of the usual family gathering focused on catching up and making small talk, the conversation centered around my upcoming projects and goals. They asked about my plans for expanding into new content areas, about potential collaboration opportunities, about my thoughts on industry trends affecting creators. Dad raised his glass for a toast, something he had never done for my achievements before. "To Emma," he said, who had the courage to build something we didn't understand, and the patience to help us learn to see it. The words were simple, but they represented years of changed perspective and genuine respect. Mom's toast was more emotional. To our daughter, who taught us that success comes in many forms, and that the most important thing parents can do is learn to recognize and celebrate the unique gifts their children bring to the world. Claire's contribution was perhaps the most significant. To my sister, who proved that following your passion isn't just a cliché, it's a viable life strategy, and who showed me that there are many ways to make your mark on the world. The evening felt like a completion of something that had begun with broken champagne glass and shifted perspectives. But it was also a beginning, the foundation for a family dynamic based on mutual respect and genuine understanding, rather than predetermined expectations and disappointment. The ripple effects extended beyond immediate family. Word spread through our extended network about my success, changing how people viewed both gaming as a career and the importance of supporting unconventional paths. Parents in our social circle began taking their children's creative interests more seriously, asking questions instead of dismissing activities they didn't immediately understand. Mom's book club started discussing the generational differences in career paths, prompted by her stories about my work. Dad's colleagues began asking him about their own children's interests in technology and creative fields, seeking advice about how to be supportive without being permissive. The transformation was most visible in how my parents spoke about me to others. Instead of explaining my career apologetically or defensively, they described my achievements with confidence and pride. They used professional vocabulary, discussed my work in business terms, and highlighted aspects of my success that resonated with traditional measures of accomplishment. This shift had practical implications for my career development. Family support provided emotional stability that allowed me to take creative risks and pursue ambitious projects. Knowing that my parents believed in my work gave me confidence to negotiate better deals, emerged from family recognition and support, was more complex and satisfying than simple vindication. It demonstrated how understanding and acceptance could transform not just relationships but also professional trajectories and personal confidence. The broken champagne glass had represented a moment of revelation, but the real transformation happened in the months and years that followed. It occurred in daily conversations that treated my work as valuable, in family events that celebrated my achievements, in casual moments that acknowledged my expertise and sought my advice. The gaming setup in my apartment had become a legitimate business headquarters, but it had also become a bridge connecting my family to a world they had once dismissed. When they visited, they understood what they were seeing. Not a bedroom filled with expensive toys, but a professional workspace equipped for serious creative and business endeavors. The community I had built online began intersecting with my offline relationships in meaningful ways. Viewers met my family during special streams. Family members appeared in content that explored the intersection of gaming culture and traditional family values, and the authentic connections between these previously separate aspects of my life enriched both domains. The financial success that had initially shocked my parents became less remarkable as they grew accustomed to the reality of content creation as a viable career. What remained meaningful was their recognition that money was just one measure of the value I had created through my work. The skills I had developed through gaming and streaming, strategic thinking, real-time problem-solving, community leadership, digital marketing, public speaking, business negotiation, were finally recognized as transferable abilities that could enhance any professional endeavor. The confidence that came from family support created a positive feedback loop that enhanced every aspect of my work. Better content attracted larger audiences, which generated more business opportunities, which provided additional validation for family members still adjusting to my unconventional career path. But perhaps most importantly, the experience taught me that seeking validation and creating value are different pursuits, and that the most sustainable success comes from focusing on the latter while remaining open to the former when it arrives authentically and freely. The girl who had once felt invisible in her own family had become a woman whose work was not only seen but celebrated, whose expertise was not only acknowledged but sought after, whose success was not only accepted but actively supported by the people who mattered most in her personal life. 2 years later, I stood backstage at the Gaming Innovation Summit, adjusting my microphone pack before delivering the keynote address to 3,000 industry professionals. The girl who had once streamed to audiences of 5 people was about to discuss the future of content creation to an audience that included executives from major gaming companies, venture capitalists, and fellow creators whose work I had admired for years. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Watching the live stream with Dad and Claire. You're gonna be amazing. We love you and we're proud of you." The message included a photo of them gathered around Dad's tablet in the living room, wearing matching t-shirts with my gaming logo that Claire had designed as a surprise. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years earlier, my family had barely tolerated my career choice. Now they were actively promoting my speaking engagement to their social networks, hosting viewing parties for my major broadcasts, and incorporating my achievements into their own professional conversations. But standing in that convention center, surrounded by the industry I had worked so hard to join, I realized that their approval, while meaningful, was no longer the driving force behind my ambitions. Somewhere along the journey from family disappointment to family pride, I had developed an internal compass that guided my decisions regardless of external validation. The keynote went better than I had hoped. My talk about authenticity in content creation resonated with creators struggling to balance personal expression with commercial viability. Industry veterans approached me afterward to discuss potential collaborations. Magazine editors scheduled follow-up interviews. Venture capital firms expressed interest in funding my expansion plans. The success felt different from my early streaming victories. Those had been personal achievements, proof that I could build something meaningful despite family skepticism. This felt like professional recognition, acknowledgement from peers who understood the complexities of what I had accomplished. The reception afterward buzzed with conversations about emerging platforms, changing audience demographics, and the evolving economics of digital content. I found myself at the center of discussions about industry trends, sought after for opinions that carried weight beyond my subscriber numbers. Marcus found me during a brief lull, bringing over 2 executives from a major streaming platform who wanted to discuss exclusive partnership opportunities. "Your girlfriend has quite a following," one of them mentioned to him, clearly not recognizing who he was dating. "Actually," Marcus replied smoothly, "she's my fiancée. And yes, she's built something extraordinary." The engagement ring had been a surprise 6 months earlier, presented during a quiet dinner at the restaurant where we had first met. Marcus had proposed not with grand gestures or public declarations, but with a simple acknowledgement of what we both already knew. We worked well together, supported each other's ambitions, and had built a relationship based on mutual respect rather than complementary deficiencies. My family's reaction to the engagement had been overwhelmingly positive, but it was their reasoning that struck me most. They weren't relieved that I was settling down or finding stability through marriage. Instead, they celebrated that I had found someone who understood and valued my work, who enhanced rather than limited my professional possibilities. The wedding planning became an unexpected collaboration between my streaming career and family traditions. Claire helped design invitations that incorporated gaming elements while maintaining elegance. Mom researched venues that could accommodate both traditional ceremonies and the technical requirements for live streaming portions of the event to my global audience. Dad's contribution was more practical but equally meaningful. He learned to operate professional video equipment so he could help document the wedding for my content archive. His attention to technical details and willingness to master new skills demonstrated how completely his perspective on my career had evolved. The wedding itself reflected the synthesis of my professional and personal worlds. Fellow streamers served as groomsmen and bridesmaids, alongside college friends and family members. The ceremony included elements that would resonate with my online community while honoring traditions important to my parents. The reception featured a gaming tournament alongside traditional dancing, with prizes donated by my sponsors and commentary provided by fellow creators. My parents participated enthusiastically, with Mom placing surprisingly well in a puzzle game competition, and Dad insisting on trying every game station despite his limited gaming experience. The most touching moment came during the toasts. Instead of generic wedding wishes, speakers shared specific stories about how my work had impacted their lives. Fellow creators discussed collaborations that had advanced their careers. Community members talked about finding friendship and support through my streams. Family members acknowledged how my success had changed their understanding of contemporary careers and creative fulfillment. Claire's toast was particularly meaningful. She spoke about growing up as the down opportunities that didn't align with my goals, and to invest in long-term growth rather than short-term security. The psychological impact was equally significant. Years of feeling like a family disappointment had created subtle but persistent self-doubt that affected my professional interactions. Once that burden lifted, I found myself more assertive in business meetings, more confident in collaborative projects, more willing to position myself as an expert in my field. Industry connections noticed the change. Colleagues commented on my increased presence at networking events, my more polished presentations, my willingness to take leadership roles in collaborative projects. The confidence that came from family validation translated into professional opportunities I might not have pursued otherwise. The most unexpected benefit was how family support enhanced my content creation. Having people in my life who understood and valued my work provided emotional depth that enriched my streaming personality. I could share family stories, discuss personal growth, and connect with viewers on levels beyond pure gaming entertainment. My audience responded positively to this evolution. Viewer engagement increased as my content became more authentic and multidimensional. Comments frequently mentioned how much they enjoyed hearing about my family's journey from skepticism to support, with many viewers sharing similar stories about overcoming family resistance to unconventional career choices. The business growth that followed was substantial. Sponsorship deals became more lucrative as my personal brand strengthened. Collaboration opportunities expanded as other creators recognized my increased confidence and professional presence. My content calendar diversified beyond pure gaming into lifestyle and entrepreneurship topics that appealed to broader audiences. But the most important development was internal. The validation I had sought from my family for years was finally given freely and genuinely. More importantly, I realized that while their support enhanced my happiness and confidence, it was no longer essential for my sense of self-worth or professional identity. The girl who had once hidden her gaming achievements had evolved into a woman who could discuss her career accomplishments with quiet confidence, regardless of her audience's initial understanding or approval. The family dynamic had shifted from one of judgment and dismissal to one of curiosity and pride, but my core identity remained consistent with who I had always been. The business continued expanding in directions I had never anticipated. Speaking engagements at gaming conferences led to opportunities in broader entrepreneurship forums. Media interviews about successful content creators opened doors to consulting work with companies trying to understand digital marketing and online community building. My parents attended these events when possible, still learning but increasingly comfortable in environments that had once felt completely foreign. Their presence provided emotional support, while also serving as tangible evidence of how much their perspective had changed. The most touching moment came when Dad created his own social media account, specifically to follow and support my content. His comments were often endearingly out of touch with gaming culture, but they were genuine and proud in ways that resonated with both me and my broader audience. Mom's involvement evolved from casual observer to active participant in the business aspects of my career. Her teaching background proved valuable for educational content, and her organizational skills helped streamline administrative tasks that had previously consumed too much of my creative time. Claire's contribution became increasingly professional, as she recognized how her marketing expertise could enhance my brand development. What had started as family support evolved into legitimate business collaboration, with her handling promotional campaigns while I focused on content creation. The success story that responsible sister who followed conventional paths, while watching her younger sibling forge an entirely different route to success. Emma taught me that there are many ways to build a meaningful life, she said, and that sometimes the most important thing family can do is learn to recognize and celebrate unconventional achievements. Dad's contribution was brief but profound. I spent years trying to understand why my daughter chose such an unusual career path, he said. I finally realized I was asking the wrong question. Instead of wondering why she chose it, I should have been asking how she succeeded at it so remarkably. Emma didn't just find her calling. She created it. The honeymoon combined traditional travel with working opportunities, visiting international gaming conventions, and meeting creators from different cultural backgrounds. Marcus embraced these experiences with genuine curiosity, learning about global gaming communities and international content creation challenges. Our relationship had become a model for other couples navigating unconventional career combinations. Marcus's legal expertise complemented my creative work, while my entrepreneurial experience informed his understanding of emerging business models. We collaborated on projects that benefited both our careers while maintaining distinct professional identities. Returning from the honeymoon, I found my inbox flooded with opportunities that reflected my elevated industry status. Book publishers wanted to discuss memoirs about building creative careers. Television networks proposed reality shows about content creators. Technology companies offered product development partnerships that could expand my brand beyond gaming. The decision-making process for these opportunities revealed how much my perspective had matured. Instead of accepting everything that validated my success, I evaluated proposals based on strategic fit and personal interest. Family input became one factor among many, rather than the determining influence it might have been earlier in my career. The book deal I ultimately accepted focused on entrepreneurship in digital media, targeting readers interested in building creative careers rather than just gaming audiences. The advance was substantial, but more importantly, the project allowed me to share insights that could help other creators navigate similar challenges. Writing the book required reflecting on the journey from family disappointment to industry recognition, examining how external validation had shaped my self-perception and professional decisions. The process revealed patterns I hadn't recognized while living through them. I realized that my early streaming success had been driven partly by a desire to prove my family wrong, but that motivation had evolved into something more sustainable and personally fulfilling. The work itself had become the reward, with external recognition serving as pleasant confirmation rather than essential validation. The book launch events drew audiences that mixed gaming enthusiasts with aspiring entrepreneurs, parents seeking to understand their children's creative interests, and established business professionals curious about digital marketing strategies. My parents attended several readings, introducing themselves proudly to other audience members, and discussing my work with the confidence of people who genuinely understood what I had accomplished. The success metrics that had once meant everything, gradual subscriber growth, increasing revenue, family approval, had become background elements in a richer professional narrative. My focus shifted toward projects that challenged me creatively, collaborations that advanced industry standards, and content that made meaningful connections with audiences. This evolution was most apparent in my streaming content, which had become more sophisticated and purposeful over time. Instead of pure entertainment or gaming tutorials, my broadcasts incorporated elements of business education, creative inspiration, and community building that appealed to diverse audiences seeking both entertainment and practical insights. The community that grew around this content included fellow entrepreneurs, creative professionals, and people navigating their own unconventional career paths. Many viewers shared stories about overcoming family skepticism, finding confidence in niche skills, and building sustainable careers around passionate interests. My parents had become part of this community, contributing perspectives from traditional career backgrounds while celebrating the achievements of creators pursuing alternative paths. Their transformation from skeptics to advocates provided hope for viewers dealing with similar family dynamics. The ripple effects extended beyond my immediate family and audience. Speaking engagements led to consulting opportunities with companies trying to understand creator economies and digital community building. Advisory positions with startups allowed me to influence platform development and creator support systems. Industry recognition culminated with an invitation to join a technology company's board of directors, advising on creator-focused product development and community engagement strategies. The appointment represented acknowledgement that my expertise extended beyond content creation into broader business and strategic domains. The annual review meetings required explaining complex creator economy dynamics to executives from traditional business backgrounds, many of whom reminded me of my parents' initial skepticism. The difference was that now I approached these conversations with confidence earned through years of proven success, rather than defensive hope for eventual validation. My family attended the board announcement reception, navigating the corporate environment with the same determined curiosity they had once brought to gaming conventions. They networked with other board members, discussing my qualifications and achievements with obvious pride while demonstrating their own intelligence and social capabilities. The most satisfying moment came when a senior executive mentioned to Dad how impressed the company was with my strategic insights and business acumen. "Your daughter has built something remarkable," the executive said. Her understanding of digital communities and creator economics is exactly what we need for our next phase of growth. Dad's response reflected years of learning and growth. She saw opportunities that the rest of us missed, he said. While we were worried about conventional career paths, she was building the future of digital entrepreneurship. We're proud of her vision and grateful she had the courage to pursue it despite our initial concerns. The conversation continued with detailed discussion of my contributions to board meetings, my role in product development decisions, and the unique perspective I brought from both creator and business backgrounds. My parents engaged knowledgeably, asking informed questions and sharing relevant insights from their own professional experiences. Driving home after the reception, I reflected on how completely the family narrative had changed. The daughter who had once been considered a failure for dropping out of college to play video games was now recognized as a business leader whose insights influenced major technology decisions. But the most meaningful transformation was internal. The external validation that had once felt essential for self-worth had become simply one element of a multifaceted professional identity. Family pride was wonderful, but it no longer determined my sense of personal or professional value. The streaming setup in my home office had evolved into a multimedia production facility, but it remained fundamentally the same space where I had built my original audience one viewer at a time. The equipment was more sophisticated, the production values higher, but the core purpose remained consistent: creating content that entertained, educated, and connected with people, seeking both entertainment and inspiration. The girl who had once felt invisible in family gatherings now hosted those gatherings, with relatives asking for career advice and business insights. The transformation was complete, not because I had proven them wrong, but because I had demonstrated that success comes in many forms, and that the most sustainable achievements are built on authentic passion rather than external expectations. The champagne glass had been replaced years ago, but the moment it represented continued to resonate, not as the pinnacle of achievement, but as the beginning of mutual understanding between people who loved each other but hadn't always known how to show it effectively. My parents had learned to see me clearly, but more importantly, I had learned to see myself independent of their perspective. The validation felt good, but it was no longer necessary. The success was meaningful, but it wasn't defined by their recognition. The real victory was building a life that felt authentic and fulfilling, surrounded by people who supported that vision, even when they didn't always understand it completely. The family that had once questioned my choices had become my biggest advocates, but their approval was now a bonus, rather than a requirement for my happiness and confidence. The streaming career that had started as escape from family disappointment had evolved into a platform for inspiring others to pursue unconventional paths with courage and persistence. The broken glass had been swept away, but the foundation it revealed had supported everything that followed. Standing in my home office, preparing for another broadcast to an audience of thousands who had become a chosen family of their own, I smiled at the journey from family disappointment to family pride. But mostly, I appreciated the journey from seeking validation to creating value, from proving others wrong to proving myself right. The story wasn't really about gaming or streaming or family dynamics. It was about finding the courage to build something meaningful despite initial skepticism, and discovering that the most important recognition comes from within rather than without. The rest was just details, pleasant confirmation of what had always been true, that authentic success feels good regardless of who's watching. The notification sound from my phone pulled me out of deep focus during a particularly intense gaming session. It was 2 a.m. and I was 3 hours into what was supposed to be a quick practice run for next week's tournament. The message was from an unknown number, but the content made me pause mid-game. "Hi Emma, this is Sarah from Portland. My daughter Mia is 15 and wants to pursue content creation instead of traditional college prep. My husband thinks it's a waste of time, but after watching your keynote speech online, I think maybe we're missing something. Would you be willing to talk to us?" I stared at the message for a long moment, remembering my own 15-year-old self hiding gaming achievements from parents who couldn't see past their preconceptions. The memory of that isolation, that desperate wish for just one adult to understand what I was building, made my decision immediate. Of course. I typed back, "Let me know when works for your family. The video call the following weekend reminded me how far I'd traveled from those early days of family skepticism. Sarah and her husband Mike sat stiffly in front of their laptop camera while Mia bounced nervously in the background, clearly excited but trying not to show it. The dynamic was painfully familiar, parents approaching their daughter's passion like concerned doctors examining symptoms of a concerning illness. "We just don't understand how this could be a real career," Mike said, his tone polite but strained. "She spends hours every day making videos about makeup tutorials and lifestyle content. Her grades are suffering because she's always editing or planning her next post. It seems like elaborate procrastination." Mia's face fell slightly, and I saw myself reflected in her expression. That particular blend of frustration and resignation that comes from loving something deeply while feeling constantly judged for that love. "Tell me about your content, Mia," I said, directing my attention to her instead of her parents. "What kind of response are you getting? What do you enjoy most about creating?" Her enthusiasm was immediate and infectious. She described building a community of teenage girls who found confidence through her makeup tutorials, the careful research she did into product ingredients and application techniques, the business relationships she was already developing with smaller beauty brands interested in authentic youth marketing. As she talked, I watched her parents' expressions shift. They were hearing details about their daughter's work that she had clearly never shared before, seeing the strategic thinking and genuine expertise behind what they had dismissed as teenage vanity. "How long have you been creating content?" I asked. 2 years, Mia replied. "I started when I was 13, just for fun, but now I have over 50,000 followers across platforms, and I'm making enough money to pay for my own equipment and supplies." The number hung in the air like a challenge. 50,000 people actively choosing to engage with content created by their teenage daughter, generating revenue that demonstrated real market value for her work. "The thing is," I said, addressing all three of them, "what Mia is describing sounds exactly like entrepreneurship to me. She's identified an audience, developed content that serves their needs, built relationships with potential business partners, and generated revenue. Those are sophisticated business skills regardless of the industry." Mike's skepticism was still evident, but I could see curiosity creeping into his expression. But is it sustainable? Can someone actually build a career around this? I spent the next 30 minutes walking them through the realities of content creation as a business, using my own journey as a case study while highlighting the skills Mia was already developing. Marketing strategy, audience analysis, brand partnership negotiation, financial management, public speaking, creative project management. The platforms might change, I explained, but the fundamental skills she's learning are completely transferable. Understanding digital audiences, creating engaging content, building authentic communities. These abilities will be valuable in virtually any field she might choose later. Sarah leaned forward, clearly processing new information. "So you're saying this isn't just a hobby that might turn into work. You're saying it's already work, just work we didn't recognize." Exactly. And here's the thing about creative careers that traditional paths sometimes miss. They require you to be entrepreneur, creator, marketer, accountant, and community manager simultaneously. Mia is getting real-world business education that most college students won't encounter until graduate school, if then. The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical concerns about education, backup plans, and family expectations. By the end, Mike was asking detailed questions about Mia's content strategy, and Sarah was taking notes about ways they could support her development rather than simply monitoring it. "I owe you an apology," Mike said to Mia as we were wrapping up the call. "I've been so worried about you not following a traditional path that I never really looked at what path you were actually creating." Mia's smile was radiant. "Does this mean I can upgrade my editing software?" The follow-up messages over the next few months were gratifying. Mia's parents had become active supporters of her content creation, helping with background research for videos and celebrating milestones they now understood were genuine achievements. Her grades improved once the family stopped treating her creative work as a distraction from real priorities. 6 months later, Mia was accepted into a prestigious summer program for young entrepreneurs, largely based on the business portfolio she had developed through content creation. Her parents sent me a photo of the acceptance letter, along with a note, "Thank you for helping us see what was right in front of us." These conversations became more frequent as my profile in the industry grew. Parents reached out seeking guidance about children interested in gaming, streaming, digital art, music production, and other creative fields that didn't fit traditional career frameworks. Each conversation reminded me how lucky I had been to eventually gain my family's support, and how many talented young people were still fighting for basic recognition of their abilities. The pattern was always similar: parents genuinely concerned about their children's futures, but lacking context to evaluate creative careers they didn't understand. Children passionate about work that felt meaningful to them, but struggling to communicate that significance to skeptical adults. Families who loved each other, but were speaking different languages about success and achievement. My role in these conversations wasn't to convince parents that every creative hobby would become a career, but to help them recognize when genuine talent and business acumen were being dismissed simply because they manifested in unfamiliar forms. Sometimes I encouraged young creators to diversify their skills or develop backup plans. Other times, I helped families understand that unconventional paths could lead to meaningful and sustainable careers when pursued with strategic thinking and genuine commitment. The most rewarding outcomes happened when families found ways to bridge their different perspectives, combining parental wisdom about practical concerns with youth insight about emerging opportunities. These hybrid approaches often produced better results than either pure traditionalism or pure creative pursuit alone. My own family had become unofficial counselors in these dynamics, sharing their transformation story with other parents struggling to understand their children's creative ambitions. Mom frequently spoke at parenting groups about learning to recognize different forms of intelligence and achievement. Dad consulted with fathers whose children were pursuing non-traditional careers, sharing practical advice about supporting unconventional choices while maintaining reasonable expectations. Claire had developed her own expertise in this area, helping young creators understand business fundamentals while maintaining creative authenticity. Her marketing background provided valuable perspective on building sustainable careers in creative industries. The ripple effects extended beyond individual families. Schools began inviting me to speak about digital careers and entrepreneurship education. Parent-teacher organizations requested workshops about understanding contemporary student interests and emerging job markets. These conversations helped bridge generational gaps that were creating unnecessary conflict in families dealing with rapid technological and cultural change. The broken champagne glass had become a symbol not just of my family's transformation, but of the broader challenge facing families navigating career landscapes that looked nothing like previous generations' experiences. The solution wasn't convincing parents to abandon all practical concerns or encouraging young people to ignore conventional wisdom entirely. It was finding ways to combine both perspectives into more nuanced and supportive approaches to career development. Standing in my home office, preparing for another video call with a family seeking guidance about their teenagers' creative ambitions, I reflected on how completely my role had evolved. The girl who had once felt invisible in her own family was now helping other families see their children more clearly, translating between generations that sometimes seemed to speak entirely different languages about work, success, and meaningful achievement. The streaming career had become a platform for much more than entertainment or even business success. It had become a bridge between traditional and emerging definitions of career achievement, helping families navigate changes that were reshaping entire industries and cultural expectations about work and creativity. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.